I'm here at JAXConf, well, just before JAXConf. This is the workshop day, so it's a bit quieter, and we've managed to catch a few minutes with Peter Bell. How are you, Peter, today?
Doing great. How about yourself, Chris?
I'm doing very well. I think I'm ready for JAXConf. We just managed to siphon off a corner of one of the rooms to chat with you in. So I'm going to talk to you about graph databases. Obviously, you've just done a workshop on Neo4j, and it seems to me there's a lot of databases out there under the NoSQL banner, and they all seem to be very, very different. And I'm just wondering, why is this, and why are there so many varying types?
I think it's a great question. I mean, there's always been different ways to persist information. Obviously, we had the main options, which was for a long time a relational database or a log file.
Yeah.
And in specialty areas, there were object databases and XML databases and stream processing databases and things like that. But it's really only in the last few years that kind of NoSQL has come to prominence. I think the main thing that's driven that is primarily scale.
Yeah.
And issues with both schemas and with just managing multiple nodes with traditional relational data stores. That wasn't good enough for companies like Amazon and the scale that Google and now Facebook are dealing with. And so what these companies have done is they've moved towards alternative ways to persist information,
Sure.
and that technology is now available to a much wider range of companies.
That's great. Which NoSQL databases have caught your eye in particular, and why?
So there's four broad types of NoSQL data stores that I look at, right? There's the idea of key value stores, which is just for very easily scaling and taking some of the load off your relational database server.
Sure.
You've got the column data stores, things like Cassandra, which work really well. Cassandra's got the multi-version concurrency control. It works really well for huge quantities of data and linear write scalability. You can add more nodes and it can more or less scale up with that in terms of write load. You've got the document databases like Couch and Mongo, and then you've got the graph databases like Neo4j. Out of all of those data stores, the two that really catch my eye obviously is Neo4j, and we'll maybe talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But then the other one, I really like MongoDB too, because it's very easy to get started with. I know a number of developers who use it for all of their applications. You can just throw it in as easily as you would a Postgres or a MySQL. And yet it gives you the ability to scale for great performance, very snappy responses, and it's wonderful for everything from storing your business data to simple logging functions.
So you'd say it's very malleable in terms of what it can do?
Absolutely, it provides a really wide range of use cases, and it's really easy to get started with.
Okay, so moving on to graphs now, and Neo4j in particular has come to prominence in the last 12 months or so, maybe even longer than that actually. What spurred this graph database kind of movement? I mean, a lot of people are talking about them. Is it numerous factors?
Yeah, there's a number of things going on. There's always been people using graph databases. And in fact, I present a number of conferences, and often when I speak to people, I'll find that a certain proportion of the people I talk to actually built something for their specific use case maybe 5 or 7 years ago. What I think is really bringing it to prominence now, though, is there is so much value available that we're just not taking from the data that we're storing. We talk about big data and storing more information, but the other thing we need to do equally is get more richness, get more business intelligence from the information we are storing. And I mean, examples like, now you see you have the Facebook social graph. Google has its knowledge graph. Twitter uses graph-based queries for certain of the problems that it solves. And so I think we're really going to see a graph renaissance where people over the next 5-6 years are going to be using graphs to get way more business value out of the information they're already capturing. Okay,
so what particular trends are you noticing with graph databases?
So I noticed two broad trends. One is using graph databases from a greenfield perspective, and that is saying, hey, we're going to build this new application and we're going to use a graph to store everything, because it's just a really good fit for the way we're thinking about the domain model. And then the other use cases, especially in some larger enterprises, I see some people who are a little reluctant to get rid of Oracle just yet. And so what they're doing instead is they're saying, you know what, this is a great way to run a whole new class of queries to get more intelligence, but we'll still persist the actual business data in Oracle or in our relational database, and basically use the graph engine as an index so that then we can figure out which 72 records we want, and then we'll go retrieve those from Oracle.
What benefits do you see from graph databases? What are the main things that are great about them?
So I think the main thing that's really great about graph databases is the breadth of problems you can use them to solve. Because when I first heard about graph databases, I'm like, okay, so if I'm building Facebook, I can see how I'd want my friends of friends.
Sure. Yeah.
But then as you start to look at the range of use cases, you see that they're being used for fraud detection. They're being used for recommendation systems, which especially as we're starting to add a social layer to many of our not just consumer products, but also our enterprise products, that's becoming increasingly important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then geographical queries. There's a really wide range of use cases, and the one thing I'd recommend anybody to do is, if they're interested in graphs in general, is download something like Neo4j, play with it for a while, and start to think about every problem from a graph perspective. It's just like if you go learn Haskell, functional programming language, it's going to change the way you write your Java code.
Yeah.
And similarly,
So it's taking those concepts and then applying it to something else, yeah.
Absolutely, and I think what this does is it gives us another set of tools for thinking about a domain model. It's not just simply relationships through many-to-many join tables and foreign keys. There are other ways of thinking about persisting and querying data, and they allow us to do some really interesting new things.
Okay. Do you see it more as an enterprise thing or a community-driven thing at the moment? I mean, it's always seems to have like a lot of people in the community talking about it, but it's never really, has it made that transition into an enterprise kind of circles, do you think?
It's absolutely transitioned. I was talking with Mark Pollock, who works over at Spring with the Spring Data Project, and they have a number of large enterprise companies that are using that, especially for this approach I said, which is this idea of cross-store persistence, where you store maybe to both Oracle and Neo4j.
Yeah,
so we're definitely seeing adoption, but there's no question that it kind of came developer up.
Okay.
But the business benefits are just so compelling that I think we're seeing the enterprises getting excited as well.
So say if there's somebody new coming in and goes, I want to try out a graph database, what considerations should they take on board before what should you look at when adopting one?
So the first thing I would look for is to see how long that graph database has been around. And one of the things I liked about Neo4j, it's been continuously deployed in production since 2003.
Yeah,
so that's
a long time.
A decade for graph database is pretty impressive. And then I would look at the languages it supports and how well it supports them. Again, and yeah, you can tell I'm a Neo4j fan, but I'm a fan because it runs on the JVM. It's literally, if you run it in embedded mode, it's a jar file. You add that to your class path and you're off and running.
That easy. Right.
And whether you're writing in Java or on the JVM using JRuby or Groovy or Clojure, it's there and available.
That familiarity, is what you're saying.
Exactly, and it was written for enterprise developers. You get ACID, atomic, consistent, isolated, durable transactions. It gives you all the things you want for enterprise data. So even though I see a lot of startups using technologies like Neo4j as well, it's a natural fit for an enterprise company.
So if we look forward to the next year, do you see more and more developers jumping on board this graph database revolution, or renaissance as you called it?
Absolutely. I think the adoption is just beginning. I think we're in the early days, but people are getting actual business results from it. They're using the projects. If you look at generally whenever you're adopting a technology, one of the things you want to do is look at the user groups. Look at firstly, how good is the support? And secondly, what kind of problems is everyone dealing with?
Yeah.
If nobody can get it configured and installed on their machine, that's one level of novelty. And really the problems people are having now are very mature problems.
Right.
So it seems to me that it's a really good time to start, if you haven't already, investigating a graph database, download it, play with it, and check it out, because I think there's going to be a lot of adoption over the next few years.
Excellent. It's been great talking to you, Peter, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Chris, thank you very much.